and thank you for joining me at Spooky Reviews. I'm the Ghostess, and I'm not such a horror movie purist that I think you can't remake things. Stories are meant to be told time and time again from different perspectives, and as long as you bring something original to the table while mixing it with the source material you're showing respect for, you can make something that's amazing. Unfortunately, many remakes are made in the name of cash grabs, and studios and focus groups can tear even good ideas to shreds when that is the bottom line. So today I will be counting down the top 13 worst horror movie remakes that I've ever seen. Let's get started with number 13, The Amityville Horror. While the original Amityville goes on forever, shows you very little and gives you a lot of build-up and a sense of slow madness, the remake gives you a ton of spooky ghosty jump scares and bloody jump cut visions of gore. Both James Brolin and Ryan Reynolds chop wood menacingly. Still, this movie takes the most liberties with the questionable story told by the very real Lutz family, and is laughably dumb throughout. Number 12, Pulse. Of all the movies that got American adaptations during the J-horror craze introduced by The Grudge and The Ring, Pulse seemed to miss the mark the most. While the original just seemed to go on endlessly, it had a mood, atmosphere, and subtlety that worked in a story about a ghostly plague. The American version is loud, flashy, with high-budget effects and a star-studded cast, but was done in a way that made me think the people involved didn't understand what the original was going for. Number 11, The Wolfman. With a cast like Benicio del Toro, Emily Blunt, and Sir Anthony Hopkins, you'd think this Wolfman remake could bring something really interesting to the table. Unfortunately, the CGI made this movie almost unwatchable, and made me long for the days of Lon Chaney fun fur. Number 10, Mirrors. Both movies feature mirrors, and the figures in the mirror can affect the real world in an interesting and creepy way. And that's about where the South Korean version keeps getting better, and the American one keeps getting worse. Now, I wouldn't say the original would be at the top of my must-see list, but the remake just fumbles the source material and somehow hopes Kiefer Sutherland can keep it from hitting the ground. It's not a terribly terrible horror movie all in all, but it's been completely forgotten about over time for a reason. Number 9, Sorority Row. Now, neither of these movies are exactly treasures, but the remake of this I Know What You Did Last Summer storyline set in a sorority house made such bizarre changes from the original. It has a couple of creative kills, but the killer motivation in the end is so absolutely laughable that the original might have been best left in the 80s where it belongs. Number 8, Prom Night. I had to double and triple check that this was actually intended to be a remake. And while it's a forgettable slasher overall, it makes it on this list for having absolutely nothing to do with the original, other than there's a prom in it. Maybe it could have redeemed itself with a step-by-step recreation of Jamie Lee Curtis's disco dance sequence. But as it is, I'm not impressed with what we were left with. Number 7, The Wicker Man. I actually really liked the original British Wicker Man. It's not brilliant or even the most captivating, but I found the twist genuinely surprising and kind of a genius commentary on the concepts of faith and destiny. And I once mentioned this to my college roommate, and she reacted in horror, calling it ridiculous and sexist, and said it had Nicolas Cage in it, and I was like, huh? And that's when I learned where all those clips of him punching women dressed as a bear came from. And yeah, the remake is an absurd exercise in over-the-top gynophobia propaganda that almost feels like a parody of itself, and maybe that's actually what Neil LaBute was going for. But it is still very watchable, otherwise it would be higher on this list. Number 6, House of Wax. Honestly, I haven't seen the original from the 1930s, but the 50s House of Wax is one of my favorite Vincent Price films, about a wax sculpture artist who is disfigured in a fire which drives him mad and to murder. And the remake took wax sculpture artist, crumpled up everything else, threw it away, and replaced it with Paris Hilton. It gets some unintentional laughs and gory gross-outs, but it suffers from a ton of horror cliches and fails as any sort of adaptation. Number 5, Last House on the Left. Let's get serious for a second. The original movie is hard to recommend and difficult to watch, but I know why it exists. It's a visual essay in pain, and up there with I Spit on Your Grave as rape revenge movies that I can honestly say have merit. I will never see it again, it's that upsetting to me. And I won't see the remake again either, but for other reasons as well. It's hard to explain how the lack of violence makes this movie more mindless without going on a whole thing. But basically, there's a certain sexualized beauty about the remake that allows the audience to be too comfortable with what they're watching. And a movie depicting what this movie depicts is not supposed to let you be comfortable. That's how it got so high on this list. Number 4, Shudder. Okay. I don't want to go on a whole rant about Asian horror movie adaptations, but I hated this remake so goddamn much from plot point 1. If you want to use a culture's lore, it makes sense, I suppose, to take your white cast to that country, like, say, The Grudge does. Fine. But Shudder is a Thai film, so sending your white people to Japan just is insulting to me. At least go to goddamn Thailand if you're going to do this sort of storytelling. It makes it seem like the director just thought people liked Asian horror because Japanese women were so scary. While the plotting and imagery are more or less intact, it lacks the balance of humor and culture that makes the original so effective. Number 3, Black Christmas. The 1970s Black Christmas is one of the best slasher movies ever made, and if you haven't seen it, shut up, go see it. A creepy killer breaks into a sorority house on Christmas and harasses and threatens the sisters inside before killing them off one by one. The calls are coming from inside the house. But the remake takes a great supporting cast of Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Michelle Trachtenberg, and Lacey Chabert, combines it with a very forgettable lead, and then makes a million changes that are all for the goddamn worst. The killer is dumb, the twist is dumb, the murder method is dumb. There's no atmosphere, and there's almost no real suspense, just loud noises and sudden gore. It ups the ick factor to a million, and takes away all the mystery that made the original a classic in the first place. Number 2, The Uninvited. No. A Tale of Two Sisters is one of my favorite horror movies, and this is not how you remake it. The Uninvited takes a soft and subtle, atmospheric and psychologically tense horror flick, and somehow works explosions into it. It does a lot of its own thing, but too much of its own thing, to the point that the twists all come off as cliche instead of awe-inspiring. I love Elizabeth Banks, but this movie was such a complete boo. Boo! Before I name my number 1 pick, here are a few less than honorable mentions. Carrie. Okay, I didn't mind all the changes they made, but all in all, you can't take the iconic De Palma version and greenwash it into a generic horror remake that feels more like a product of its times than truly bringing something new to the table. Friday the 13th. It's a somewhat entertaining homage to a handful of Friday the 13th movies, but it fails to capture what little character there is of Jason Voorhees, and that almost seems hard to do. I Spit on Your Grave. This definitive rape revenge flick can both be seen as a bunch of violent, upsetting smut, and a critical essay about sexual dynamics in a toxic society. However, the remake seems more interested in making a torture porn than saying anything, and doesn't quite deliver the impact that makes the original worth existing. A Nightmare on Elm Street. It tried something. I just think they tackled it all from an angle that doesn't work for either the ultra dark and campy insanity that were in the original movies. Poltergeist. Okay, so your young son, who is afraid of everything, is going to have a bedroom that's a creepy attic full of clowns, with his own way out of the house, a sink, and a mirror, even though they have a teenage daughter who would have been all over that shit? My suspension of disbelief was broken there, and it never recovered. Psycho. It's not a bad movie, really, and if you never knew the original existed, you'd probably be fine with it. But what universe are you existing in where you've never heard of this near-perfect 1960s thriller classic? So a shot-for-shot remake in color just feels pointless. And the #1 worst horror movie remake is... The Haunting. So bad. So bad. I love the Shirley Jackson book, The Haunting of Hill House. And I love the very faithful 1963 film. Hell, I even love the barely related Netflix show. But every change made here, once again, is for the worst. The creepy atmosphere unravels very quickly because of terrible CGI. Not even a fantastic set design or a cast including Liam Neeson, Owen Wilson, and Catherine Zeta-Jones can make this movie watchable. Terrible plotting, terrible writing, and generally a terrible use of the source material. Good for a couple of laughs, but very little else. So those were, in my humble opinion, the top 13 worst horror movie remakes of all time. If I missed one, let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Follow me at Spooky Ghostess on Instagram, at Ghostess Spooky on Twitter, and join me next time when I review the top 13 best horror movie remakes of all time. Thanks for watching, and boo for now. Worst horror